really quickly and just say thanks for coming, everyone. My name is Fareed, and Emily and I are hosting this event as reps of the Undergraduate Environmental Union at Duke. Currently, we are a subset of the Duke student government, and our mission is really just to promote collaboration and create a network between the environmental institutions on campus and beyond. Today, we welcome Jamie Margolin, who is a 19-year-old Colombian Jewish-American organizer, activist, author, public speaker, and filmmaker. She's the co-founder of the international youth climate justice movement called 0 Hour that led the official youth climate marches in Washington, D.C. and more than 25 cities around the world during the summer of 2018. And today she will be giving a presentation on the roots of the Green New Deal. And we just want to thank Jamie so much for offering her time today. And without further ado, take it away, Jamie.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to start screen sharing now. Okay. So first I'm going to give you guys a little, let me go to present mode. I'm going to give you guys a little bit more about what 0 Hour is. So 0 Hour is a youth climate justice organization. These are all pictures from our 2018 events. We had, if in the center, you can see the march. So this was all the summer of 2018. Before the school strike for climate movement started, there were the youth climate marches organized by 0 Hour. And so there was a march on Washington in July of 2018, as well as a lobby day. Here we are meeting with Bernie Sanders, as well as we gave a lot of educational presentations to different schools, programs, et cetera. So we started off the summer of 2017 through the summer of 2018 is when 0 Hour got started. And these are some pictures from some of our events. So the organization's guiding principles, it's important before we get into the Green New Deal, because that's what I wanted to talk to you all today. It's important to understand that, oh, I went back by accident. Okay, it's important to understand that the climate crisis is intersectional. So as a movement that we believe that those who are on the front lines of any movement should lead that movement, that youth leadership is transformational and visionary. And then these are some of our other guiding principles. I won't read them through because they're right there, but basically the climate crisis intersects with all other social justice issues. So it's important not to neglect those issues when talking about climate change. So now let's get into the Green New Deal. I know it's talked a lot about in the media, but I want to go a little bit more in depth about it because I think it's important that everyone knows what it contains, and so we can better fight for it and combat misinformation when people are like, no, there shouldn't be a Green New Deal, or it's too radical, or all of that stuff. So. Okay, so I'm going to skip through this part because I assume that you guys all know how the climate is changing. So I'm going to skip through that. What's at stake? Basically, the temperature is expected to rise to 4 degrees Celsius by 2100, which will irreversibly alter every aspect of life on Earth, and not in a good way. This is just, so basically, this is all, I assume that you don't need to be convinced of the damages. So what I'm gonna give you this in case you ever are talking to a climate denier or someone who underestimates how important it is to take climate action, or someone who's like, oh, but it's gonna cost too much money to take climate action. Like there are a lot of people out there who are like, I wanna take climate action, or I kind of agree, but it's gonna cost too much. This is a great thing if you guys want to like screenshot on your computers. The red shows all the economic costs of climate change, and the blue shows the only economic benefits. As you can see, there are like 3 blue things, and the entire rest of the country is red. So if someone's arguing, oh, well, it's just going to cost too much money to take climate action, well, actually, you can show them this and be like, it's actually going to cost more money not to. Okay. So again, skipping through this, I assume you all know what fracking and offshore drilling and deforestation is. Okay. So let's get into the Green New Deal. So what is the actual Green New Deal? So the Green New Deal is a resolution, it's not a bill, to address climate change through a just transition and renewable energy sources. It's a vision for the future, and it's structural change to our entire economic and energy systems. And what's unique about it is it addresses socioeconomic inequality, which a lot of climate policies don't, because a lot of climate policies view it as separate, like, okay, here's the economy and then here's the environment, when in reality, these things are intersectional, and the Green New Deal is revolutionary in that it actually addresses that. So when your, I don't know, Republican uncle or whoever is saying, no, I don't want Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to take away my burgers, because Fox News is like, AOC is going to steal your cows. You're never going to be able to fly on an airplane. The Green New Deal is going to destroy life on Earth as we know it, the fabric of society. They're going to break into your house and eat your hamburger. You know what I mean? There's a lot of fear mongering in conservative media about the Green New Deal. So, you know, if you ever are talking to your conservative uncle or whoever, this is what you can tell them. The Green New Deal is not anti-hamburger. There's actually no mention of cows at all in the Green New Deal. It's not a loss of jobs. That's another thing Fox News complains about. It's a creation of new green jobs. And it is not no more flying on planes. I also saw Fox News being like, what do they want us to go back to the horse and buggy? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the Green New Deal are trying to ban you from flying on planes. There's nothing about banning you from flying on planes in that. Another thing they say is it's the decline of economy. No, that's not true. It's the regeneration of new markets. All of those are propaganda tactics fueled by corporate media to scaremonger people. So what is the Green New Deal? It is focused on renewable and slash carbon neutral energy. It's focused on a just transition for all workers. It's a complete economic transformation in the energy grid, and it's requiring a mass mobilization of our government and its people to combat the climate crisis. So the reason why it's called the Green New Deal is that it's based off of the New Deal, which was a series of programs and public work projects to combat the Great Depression passed by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And that's what started Social Security, Civilian Conservative Corps, et cetera. So just like the New Deal helped lift our country out of the Great Depression, the Green New Deal can help lift our country out of climate crisis. So that is why it is called that. So what is different, though, is that the Green New Deal includes everyone and is not just designed for white Americans. So obviously there were some flaws in the New Deal. It was made in the 30s, and you know, segregation and all of that was still in place in the 30s. So it's not like the New Deal was without its racism and downsides, but the Green New Deal is correcting those past mistakes and is designed for everyone, not just white people. And it incorporates environmental degradation, not just economic development, and it prioritizes union labor. So it's also for workers. Here's a little quote from it that is about economic justice and a just transition. So the resolution also guarantees a lot of other issues like a $15 an hour minimum wage, safe union jobs, universal health care, and public transit. Again, people in conservative media are like, they're using this to try to force you guys their socialist agenda of like healthcare for all. Sure. The climate crisis also impacts health. It also impacts, I mean, you can't talk about healthcare and people's health without talking about the climate crisis. Asthma rates are going up, cancer rates are going up, natural disasters, well, unnatural disasters as they are with climate change, they all cause health issues. Pollution causes health issues. The chemicals in our water, air, and land cause health issues. And so having a universal healthcare system that addresses all of this so that our healthcare system is built in to understand the climate crisis is very important. Also, public transit. Let me go back. I live in New York City, so the subway is great, but I feel like the whole country should have something similar because we can cut down a lot on fossil fuels if everyone uses public transit. That doesn't mean, again, they're not trying to take away your cars, but that would be best. I mean, a lot of European countries and Asian countries have amazing public transit systems, but the United States is very far behind, and there have been attempts at public transit systems that have been knocked down by special interests. So that is also what the Green New Deal is fighting for. So it's an overall vision for a better world, not just a specific climate policy. So the people who made it are Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ed Markey, two iconic environmentalists in the government whom I support and are doing a great job, but that's just me. So the climate crisis and other environmental issues disproportionately impact frontline and exploited communities. So I just have a list here. Basically, if you are experiencing some sort of injustice in the world, chances are you are experiencing that makes you a little bit more vulnerable to the climate crisis. So if you are someone who's low income or poor, if you have less resources to be able to make it, that's going to hurt you. If you are homeless, unhoused, that then you're exposed to the elements when things get bad. So basically, any marginalized community gets impacted worse than, like, I don't know, if you're a rich white man, then you have the resources you need to go where you need to go, and you're not obstructed by any like societal barriers of racism or sexism, and you can basically survive better than other people who can't, which is why the environmental crisis is inherently unjust. So here are some examples of environmental injustice. Unhealthy air and drinking water disproportionately impacts the health and safety of children and people with chronic health issues and disabilities. Pipelines are built on or near Indigenous lands a huge percent of the time, and fossil fuel plants are mostly built in low-income communities and communities of color. So the Green New Deal, here you can read it. It says that it acknowledges that environmental degradation has been exacerbated by racial, regional, social, environmental, and economic injustices. And it acknowledges the people who are worst impacted, which is something that no national American climate policy has ever done. So this is what the Green New Deal guarantees: the stoppage of all fossil fuel projects, clean air and water and healthcare and healthy food, and acknowledging all treaties with Indigenous people. This is an important one. Respecting Indigenous sovereignty, respecting Indigenous people is actually a huge part of the solution to the climate crisis. And a lot of people overlook that, but the Green New Deal doesn't. And so I think that's wonderful. It's a little bit more about it. Okay, so the implementation of the Green New Deal would mean radical changes to all sectors of the United States, and it would surpass conventional barriers to address the discrepancies throughout the nation's current standing. So basically, it would mean that a lot of different, because the climate crisis is so intersectional and our government is like, this is health, this is poverty, this is environment, and they're like separate committees for everything, the Green New Deal would force us to collaborate in radical ways because we cannot solve this separately. A green vision for the future. A green vision for the future is essentially what the Green New Deal is. So it's providing people of the United States with high quality healthcare, affordable, safe, and adequate housing, economic security, and clean water, clean air, affordable food, and access to nature. I actually recommend that everyone read the Green New Deal. It's actually like not that long. It's like a 10-minute read maximum. And it's actually, okay, I'm not a policy person. Okay, I'm a film student. So I have the brain of an arts kid. So I don't like to read nitty-gritty policy things. However, the Green New Deal is actually not entertaining, but it's not boring. It's very short and it's very inspiring. Like, it's a very inspiring piece of legislation. So I encourage everyone to just Google like Green New Deal PDF and read it. And you'll see that all the scaremongering and fear tactics about it are quite silly because it's actually a very beautiful document. I would like read it just for fun. Like, it's really amazing. So I wanted to talk to you all about the Green New Deal today because I feel like it's something that's very important and it's talked about a lot in the media and it's fear-mongered about a lot, but it's important for people like you guys who care about the environment. And I didn't want to come here and tell you why you should care. Obviously, you know why. That's why you're here. That's why you're taking the time to be on Zoom, even though everyone is on Zoom all the time and is all zoomed out and is so sick of Zoom events, but here you are because you care. So I can send you guys also some of the resources in this presentation afterwards if you want any of the graphs or facts or anything like that to disprove, you know, anyone who tries to argue with you. But that is basically why I wanted to give you this today. It's just some myth busting about the Green New Deal. So whenever you're out talking about it to people or you hear some misinformation, you can combat it. That is all for me. I will open it up to Q&A for you guys to ask me whatever you want.
Thank you so much, Jamie. That was amazing. Thanks so much for offering your time. Obviously, if anyone has any questions that just wants to unmute and ask away, please ask away. If not, we have some discussion questions of our own. So, but first of all, don't be shy. Please unmute and ask away.
Hey, Jamie, thanks for that presentation. I had a quick question about your experience with 0 Hour and being a leader in that movement. What were the challenges that you found being a youth voice in this activism space, and kind of how did you combat some of the doubts or, you know, some of the comments about like, oh, you're too young to be doing this. You know, I feel like it's so easy, especially in the policy space, for people to dismiss youth voices. But do you have any suggestions for how we can kind of flip it around and be empowered by it and be more motivated to, you know, create change?
I mean, this is going to sound really basic and like not super, I don't know, it's not some sort of magic bullet, but honestly, it's just like you just kind of shrug and are like, okay, and then you just continue doing your work. Like I haven't, when people were kind of, they never said, oh, you're young, you can't do it. People don't really say that, but they more like imply it, or they do it by like not giving you resources, not funding you, not doing this. And so essentially, the way to combat any sentiments like that is just to just keep moving forward and ignore them. I know that that sounds really like, you know, it's not some sort of trick or anything, but it just keep going, just keep chugging forward. There's no, the only way to like reclaim or empower yourself is just to keep doing what you're doing. And if someone hates on you, then cool, okay, and just keep at it. That's not like a very articulate response, but that's honestly the only thing that we've been able to do. Is just, no one's ever like, oh, you're young, you can't do it, but they do imply that heavily, or they are condescending. And when someone's condescending or implies heavily that you can't do something, you just, I don't know, move on, thank them for your time, and thank them for their time, and just keep going and like prove them wrong.
If anyone else has any questions. Oh, I think Colton asked a question in the chat, which I will read off. So he asked, are there any parts of the Green New Deal that you're worried about or think should go further?
I mean, here's the thing. The Green New Deal is not like an exact policy. So the Green New Deal doesn't label like exact parts per million or things like that, or every single level of exactly how we're going to get to each stage of decarbonization and all this. It doesn't go into the nitty gritty. So, but that's okay. It's not like it's not enough. It's because the Green New Deal it's not like an exact, it doesn't cover everything. It's an overall framework for change and how we're going to restructure our society. So the Green New Deal passes, it's not like, okay, great, we have nothing else to pass. Then to fit in with that framework, we pass other policies, other laws, other things like that. It's not an automatic, like overall one quick fix solution. It's more of a framework to restructure our society and restructure our government with a mindset and culture of shifting away from fossil fuels and the extractive way that we live. And also it's about simply understanding the social justice inequalities and fighting for a just transition. But every single step of that just transition is not listed in there. It's expected that other policies and things are passed to actually make that just transition a reality. So I think the Green New Deal is enough for what it is, but it's not enough, obviously, to fix everything.
I had kind of a question relating to that. Like, what kind of infrastructure needs to be put in place? I know, like you mentioned, it's not like a policy proposal or anything, but what kind of infrastructure needs to be put in place? How do we start convincing people of the benefits of it, and how do we stop the like you said, the propaganda from corporate media?
I mean, you can't stop Fox News from doing what they do, but you can have the tools to combat it whenever you're presented with someone who is trying to doubt it or trying to essentially make up lies. You can basically be armed with the facts and go through. And if someone's like, but I don't want Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to take away my hamburgers, you can be like, well, actually, here's the bill. You can read it. She doesn't mention cows or hamburgers once. And just basically, I think that's honestly the best way we do it, is patiently myth busting. And to the people who are set in their ways, we don't even bother with them, because if facts can't convince someone, then that's a completely other problem.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to, so I haven't read the language of the Green New Deal, unfortunately, but conversations I've had just with people who are not particularly opinionated on the subject, or that it is this sweeping, it asks for too much, is usually the language that comes out. And I'm just curious your thoughts, because it is designed to be more of a framework, it's a bit vaguer. A lot of people perceive that as asking for way too much at once. as opposed to perhaps the passing of smaller bills that would align itself with the Green New Deal without actually calling it a part of this larger Green New Deal. Does that kind of make sense? What
you rephrase the question? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious. What would you have to say to people who are saying that the Green New Deal is this? It's too big. It asks for too much. It's not feasible because it's too vague and is thus asking way too much of people and politicians.
I think the alternative is asking way too much of people to sacrifice. The alternative of not passing a Green New Deal and not having these strong climate policies in place is asking like, well, are you fine with losing everything in life on Earth? I feel like that's a lot more to ask than are you willing to spend some money? I mean, we already spend so much money on the military. It's like, if you can spend that much on a nuclear arsenal, why can't you spend it on saving life on Earth? And so I feel like a lot of people are going to be like, it's too much, it's too strong, it's too radical. And it's like, radical as opposed to what? As opposed to just letting everything get destroyed. I feel like that's not a sacrifice that we should make.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you were saying that you are not necessarily like a policy fanatic, but in regards to the Green New Deal, what would be like an ideal timeline? And let's say it gets accepted or passed or whatever, what are the next steps forward for people, for politicians, just in general?
The next steps forward are, I think people, there has to be like a big effort, a groundswell of people showing their support and calling their politicians and pressuring them. Right now, the Democrats have full control of the government, but that doesn't mean that all Democrats are going to be in support of the Green New Deal. President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have not expressed support of it. So pushing the president and vice president to be in support of it, pushing the Democrats who aren't in support to be support of it. We have to take advantage of this window of time where we have the majority, but Democrat doesn't automatically equal climate action. It doesn't automatically equal they're going to do everything they can. So it's important to, I think, push the president and vice president. And I think a public cry for a Green New Deal and more of a public pressure is definitely the next step.
Have we seen anything like the Green New Deal before, or is there any proven success model? How do we know that it'll work?
Well, I mean, it's like, how do you know that anything's gonna, it's not like we can predict exactly what will work and what will not in this unpredictable climate crisis. However, it has been backed up by scientists and policy experts, so we can basically know it'll work as much as anything. Though it's how much we make it work. We can pass it and then not do anything that it says, and then that won't work. Or we can pass it and follow what it says, and that will work. So it's really up to us and how we implement it.
I'm curious, we're in this moment right now. It feels like we're in this moment, after George Floyd's murder, after the Black Lives Matter protest, this emphasis on more equitable climate action has come up in full force, both in environmental spaces, but also in the White House. What was it? Biden just made this whole commitment. It was in the New York Times or the Washington Post, one of those big places, saying that he has emphasized environmental justice in his work, appointing all of these top-notch people who will consider environmental justice in their work. And that's just a step away from the Green New Deal. I'm curious your thoughts on those steps that are currently being taken outside of the Green New Deal framework. Are they enough? Are they, or do you see this Green New Deal framework as not necessarily the end all be all, but in the context of what's happening, is it enough? Are we moving in the right direction, or do you think it can't happen without the Green New Deal?
I mean, I'm not saying that climate action can't happen without the Green New Deal. Like, it doesn't have to be that specific policy, but what is outlined in the Green New Deal does have to happen in order for us to make it. So it's not like it has to be the Green New Deal, but what is outlined in it does have to come true, if that makes any sense. So whether it's a different named policy, but it has the same enactments and it has the same goals, then that's fine. But what is outlined in the Green New Deal has to happen.
And so do you have thoughts on, say, the appointment of, I feel like this is kind of a dumb question. I'm sure you have thoughts on it. I'm sure they're positive thoughts, but like the appointment of Deb Haaland or Michael Regan and some of
I
these.
think the appointment of Deb Haaland is amazing, and I think that moves towards, we need to have more Indigenous voices on the forefront, who are the ones enacting policy and the ones making decisions for their communities. And I think like the appointment of Deb Haaland is a step in the right direction, but there shouldn't just be like the fact that she's the first Indigenous woman to hold that cabinet position. I mean, on one hand, like, yes, it's great that she's making history, but I mean, there should be way more, like, there should be so much representation that it's not even news, if that makes any sense. Like, our government should be so representational of the people, and it should have so many Indigenous voices, so many voices of communities, that a diverse cabinet shouldn't be news. And the fact that it is, I mean, it's great. I'm so in support of her appointment, and I'm so happy that she got confirmed, but I wish that she wasn't the only one.
Just one more follow-up, if you don't mind, just on that, because that gets me thinking about when we're talking representation in Congress, perhaps that's a consequence of either who's running and who has the ability to run for political office, or who the American people are voting in. And I'm just curious your thoughts on, I guess, the overarching climate with which the United States exists in. Perhaps we're not seeing as much diversity in Congress because people are not voting people of color into Congress. I'm just curious if you have thoughts on what needs changing from a public standpoint, assuming that's the case. That might not be what's happening.
I mean, what needs changing, there's a lot. Obviously, there's systemic racism. Also, there is gerrymandering. That is a huge problem. There's also different systems in place to keep those in power. I mean, the United States is inherently, it's founded on white supremacy. And so there are so many barriers for anyone who goes up against white supremacy or isn't like a rich white man to be able to break in. So I think what we have to do goes really deep. It's about unpacking everything. And so obviously we do it one step at a time, but I think another thing is making it easier for marginalized people to vote. There are so many laws that make it harder for people of color, for low-income communities, for Indigenous communities to vote. And so I think ending voter suppression is a huge part of that, because if the communities actually are able to have their voices heard and are not suppressed, then our Congress is going to look a lot more representative.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone has any more questions, please ask away. If not, I guess I just want to say thank you again so much, Jamie, for offering your time. It was a really wonderful presentation, and thank you for that wonderful Q&A portion.
Thank you so much.
You'll be receiving an email with the recording of the presentation, which is great. Other than that, are we good to go, Emily?
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.